Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kirsten Parr, and I am joining you today to introduce our speaker. Jackie Matthews is with us. Jackie is the Executive Director of Communications at ISB, and she is well poised to set us on a path to tell your teacher vacancy grant story. Please join me in welcoming Jackie.
Thanks so much, Kirsten. Yeah, thank you so much for having me at the Teacher Vacancy Grant Summit. It was such a great day of learning and connecting with all of the grantees and talking about how important it is that we share about the impact of these teacher vacancy grant dollars. So that is what I am here to share with you today. This is a truncated presentation of the session I led at the Teacher Vacancy Grant Summit for those who were not able to participate. So at the summit, we had some more hands-on activities and some pair and share and some working time to really get folks started. So this will just be basically the first half of that presentation where I go over what the purpose is of what one of these tools is that we've created for you, this teacher vacancy grant one-pager template. I'll walk you through the different elements of that, give some storytelling best practices, and then we'd love to talk about next steps, but we won't have the same working time that we did in that summit session. That being said, if you've blocked an hour for this webinar, we'll probably take about 20 minutes going through the content. And so if you would like to use the remaining 30 to get a jump start on your teacher vacancy grant one-pager, we would definitely encourage you to do that, to use the time you've already set aside to get a head start on creating that content. And we're hoping to have these ready to share in January. So I will go ahead and dive in here. First, because we're talking about storytelling today, I would love to start out with a story about a woman named Brahmarambika, who immigrated to the United States from India. She had an engineering degree in computer science and became a substitute teacher for a school district here in Illinois, Oswego CUSD 308. She found that the environment within her school district was so supportive and nurturing, it was so dynamic and inclusive, and it really became the cornerstone of her professional growth and personal well-being. And when her district received a teacher vacancy grant from the state of Illinois, that district created a residency program to help people like Brahmarambika teach while simultaneously taking the college courses necessary to receive teaching certifications and additional endorsements. So we remember she was first a substitute and then was able to participate in this teacher residency program, because this is a true story and it describes the Next Gen residency program at Oswego. District 308 is a tier 1 district funded at only 72% of adequacy that started the 2022-2023 school year with 23 open positions. It now has 21 teacher residents and 10 leader residents in its inaugural Next Gen residency cohort, and Brahmarambika is one of those residents. This program allowed her to pursue her master's degree and transition from a substitute to a fully licensed teacher. And this is the sort of impact that we want to help you convey about how your districts are utilizing teacher vacancy grants to invest in evidence-based solutions to solve acute recruitment and retention challenges in the short term and build pipelines for talent that will benefit your district and its students in the long term. So this is our agenda for today. Give you a moment to just take that in. And like I mentioned in the beginning, the big outcome we would like for you to take away from this session is to start packaging the story of your district's teacher vacancy grant into a one-page handout. And here's why. We need to advocate for and ultimately secure a third year of funding for this grant. So this grant was initially proposed for 3 years at $45 million per year as a pilot program. And we've secured 2 years of those funding to date. And now we're heading into a new legislative session, and funding is not guaranteed. We are in a tight fiscal environment. If anyone tuned into the ISB board meeting yesterday, we heard revenue projections from COGFA, and we are in a tight fiscal environment, even tighter than we were last budgetary session. And so we need to demonstrate to lawmakers why they should continue to invest in this teacher vacancy grant program, because this program is pending appropriations, and we need to explain the impact that these dollars have. Why should they invest in this grant, in this teacher vacancy grant, and not put $45 million into EBF, or $45 million into member initiatives, or $45 million into something else? Why should they continue to prioritize such valuable state funding into the teacher vacancy grant? How is the teacher vacancy grant from other programs that are funded, such as affinity groups or Teach for America? How is your district using this funding, and how does it benefit lawmakers, local communities? So who do we need to reach to make this happen, to get this third year of funding? Primarily the General Assembly, meaning your own local officials. As you know, they know your districts, they know you, they care about what's happening in their own local communities. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, all politics is local. No one can tell the story of the value and impact of the teacher vacancy grant to local elected officials better than you, telling the story about how these teacher vacancy grant dollars are making an impact in their own backyard. We have a couple of secondary audiences too. Media can write positive stories, which your local officials can see, especially if you email it to them. And we've got local stakeholders, parents, unions, board members, who can join you in advocacy and expressing support for the teacher vacancy program, but only if they know about it, only if you engage with them and lead them in that storytelling process. So our strategy is to raise awareness of the local impact of these dollars and how your investments are resulting in real, tangible results. And as you can see, we continue to emphasize local, because ISB can issue press releases. We can talk about the research from iWork that really demonstrated the impact that these dollars are having at the state level. But only you can really tell the story of the local impact of these dollars. So to help you accomplish this goal, we have created a template. It's a one-pager template that you see here on the screen, and it's got a few sections. Starts out with the challenge. And then we get into strategic local investments, how you are allocating these funds to meet the local challenge that you are experiencing or were experiencing at the beginning of this grant program. And then we've got outcomes for each strategy. And then we've got some optional elements here, like adding a photo or adding a quote. And so we're going to dive into each of these sections. But before we do, please take a moment to download the one-pager template. So I'm going to give that 30 seconds for everyone to download the one-pager template. So you can get the link to that web page either by typing it into your screen or pointing your phone at the QR code and scanning it. And that'll take you to the Teacher Vacancy Grant Pilot Program web page. Scroll down to the Teacher Vacancy Grant Summit blue bar, and then the one-pager template is linked in the agenda. And if you have any trouble finding it, we are monitoring the chat and the question box, and Kirsten is going to put this link into the question box so you can also find it there in your control panel. So I'm going to trust that everyone's been able to find it. So now we'll move through it. So first on the one pager, we want to describe the challenge. Set the stage for your story. The same way that we set the stage for Brahmaramika's story in the beginning, what was the challenge? The challenge was at a district level, the district had 23 unfilled positions. And from a personal level, Brahmaramika only had a substitute's license. So set the stage for your story. Tell the story of your district. You can use data. You can delve into any rationales you discovered during your root cause analysis. But think of telling this story the way that you would tell it to someone over the dinner table. To your Uncle Mark and Aunt Cheryl when they're over at Thanksgiving dinner, holiday dinner, and you're trying to explain to them what this teacher vacancy grant is and why it's important. So try to stay away as much as possible from jargon or using too much data. We want to really be able to explain this to someone who's not immersed in your district and immersed in education policy like you are. So here's an example. I'll give you a moment to just read through that. So I want to point something out about this challenge and the way that it's written. The first thing you might notice is that there's actually, besides the year, no numbers in this story. It says the district was facing high turnover. In order to tell that story, do they really need to know what the percentage retention was or the percentage attrition? Maybe not. Maybe they just need to know that in general, the turnover was high. And it was particularly high in the special education program. So this group of students who probably needed consistent and high quality instruction the most were the ones who were cycling through substitutes and under-credentialed teachers. I think anyone, even outside of education, who's not in the school or classroom every day, can see that that's a problem. And then the district also faced a lack of teacher diversity. Students of color did not have the opportunity to see themselves represented in the teaching staff. So again, not needing a ton of data or stats, not needing a ton of jargon to communicate the challenge that this district was experiencing in layman's terms, as if you're explaining it to one of your relatives over the dinner table who doesn't work in education. How would you talk about that to them? So the next section of the one-pager is strategic local investments. Here's where you briefly, emphasis on briefly, describe the specific strategies your district has put into place. We want brief, punchy, concise language. If it's long, your legislator is not going to read it. So that's why we have clear, short headings throughout this one-pager so they can easily see what this is about. Think of the one-pager almost as something that people are going to scan rather than read in depth. So the name of the strategy needs to be something that they understand. So here's an example. Let's say this was for Oswego. Instead of saying next gen residency program, we say teacher apprenticeship program or just teacher residency program. Your district might have a special name or a fancy title for the exact type of program that you have. And in the name of the program, it might list all the different community colleges and partners that are involved with that program. But think of this, again, in terms of someone just scanning through it. What's the simplest and easiest way to describe that strategy? And so you want to describe that strategy after you give it a title in 1 or 2 sentences, something that's really easy for folks to take in. And the next next section of the one-pager is outcomes, arguably the most important part of your story. So here's where we do probably want to use a little bit of data, a little bit of numbers. What have been the results? And one suggestion for how to create this one-pager might even be to start here. Start at the outcomes of your teacher vacancy grant investments. Do a little brainstorming on what are the most compelling outcomes that you've seen since investing these dollars. Because you may have invested your money in 10 different strategies. Maybe you have an evaluation report, maybe you've got a partnership over here, maybe you've got a culture and climate initiative here. You've got many different ways that you're investing these dollars, but not all of them need to make it onto the one-pager because we want to be selective in telling the most compelling story that we can. So it doesn't have to be a full accounting of every penny, right? It's not an accounting document, it's a storytelling document. And so you might start in workshopping your one-pager with the outcomes. What were the most important outcomes? Again, if you're trying to tell someone, this is what the grant accomplished in my district, what would you lead with? So these are some examples of just different outcomes that you might use throughout the one-pager. Increased teacher retention by 15%. Had 10 program completers, all hired by the district, with 3 of them in special education. 54% of the participants are educators of color, compared to 26% of current teachers. And so you'll also notice that these outcomes tie back to the challenge talked about in the first section. So you might start here with the outcomes. What does that say about the challenges of the district to begin with? And then which are the initiatives that are going to be the most powerful that speak to these outcomes and the challenge? And I got this question during the initial session we did at the Teacher Vacancy Summit, which was, do you have a rule of thumb of how many examples we should pick, or how many initiatives, how many strategies we should put on this one pager? And my suggestion would be 3. There is, in the English language, something called the rule of 3, which basically is a principle, a loose principle, that examples that come in 3s give our brains enough information to see the pattern that we're trying to point out, but not so much information that we forget what we were talking about in the first place. And you see this rule of 3 in lots of different examples and phrases that we all know. I came, I saw, I conquered. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we see these little examples of 3 in lots of different places, and they're things that our brains can just for some reason easily hold on to. We can hold on to 3 examples and understand the pattern that they're pointing out without losing the thread. So you might think of, what are the 3 top outcomes that we've seen? What are the 3 initiatives that resulted in those outcomes? And then, what does that say about our challenges? And so here's a few optional elements you might also consider including. That story from the beginning with Bram Rambica, I think, was so powerful because it included a photo of the teacher and her speaking in her own words about the impact of this grant. And so we would really encourage you to include an image on your one-pager. And we did this one-pager in Word so that you could manipulate it. Maybe where we have the image is not the best place once you get all your content in there and you want to put it somewhere else. Please feel free. This is a template. It's an example that we created to try to be helpful and give you some thoughts on structure and content. But you can move things around, and that's why we made it in Word, so that it would be easiest for you to move around, and maybe you want the picture to be on the left or you want the picture to be really big at the bottom. But I would encourage you to use an image of students or teachers impacted by these grant funds. So instead of even a school logo or an image of your school building, take a photo of the teacher or teachers who have been a part of this grant program. And then you can add a quote from them. So think of this quote not as a quote from an administrator talking about the grant, but a quote from a teacher who has benefited from these grant dollars, either a current teacher who's benefited from culture and climate initiatives, or a teacher who's gone through a residency program, or a teacher who's a visiting international teacher who you've been able to obtain through the grant funds, and get a quote from them talking about, from a personal perspective, the impact of these grant dollars. So here's another example of a teacher testimonial, the kind of photo, quote, impact that can have. And here's another example. So I do want to note that these fancy graphics were created by our, the marketing firm that we've retained for our fancy multi-million-dollar teacher recruitment marketing campaign. The answer is teaching. But the stories came from you all. We reached out to all of the grantees from the Teacher Vacancy Grant and asked you all to submit teacher testimonials. We got these amazing and powerful stories from real teachers who have benefited from the Teacher Vacancy Grants. So you have these stories in your own districts, and I encourage you to ask the teachers who have participated if you can take a photo and get a quote from them, and many of them will be very happy to participate because they're very happy to have had access to these grant funds and to these opportunities that the grant has afforded. And you don't have to produce anything nearly this fancy. All you need is a photo and a quote to have that impact. The point is, it's a real story, a real emotional connection, talking about what the opportunities afforded by this grant have meant to that teacher personally and professionally. So that wraps up my section on the Teacher Vacancy Grant one-pager. I have a couple more slides for you talking about other communications tactics you can use once you have the Teacher Vacancy Grant one-pager completed. So I'll pause here for questions to see if, I think Kirsten's going to moderate some questions for us. And once you have your one-pager completed as a Word document, please email those to the email address on the screen, teachervacancygrant@isb.net. The comms office here at ISB is going to do one round of feedback. So we're going to take a look at what you've created, give you one round of notes, and then ask you to send us your final one back and to start using it as an advocacy tool. So we'd love to help you out. You don't have to send it to us if you don't want to, but we would love to be able to give you some feedback and take a look if that would be helpful for you. So you can send your completed one-pager as a Word document to this email address, and you'll get one round of feedback from ISB here in the comms office.
So at this time, we don't yet have any questions, but we do have both the chat and the question box available. So if we do have anyone from the audience who has a question, now would be a great time.
And then once we have a few of these completed and we've gone through some feedback and we've got some final one-pagers, we'll circulate a few as some more examples to help get folks' juices flowing.
So one goal we have that we shared at the Teacher Vacancy Grant Summit is the Power BI report that is available on the webpage. It has some of your district reported data included, and we can also include your one-pagers on that page of the report. So we'll continue to share these out for advocacy as well.
And we've gotten quite a few of them turned in for the folks who were able to join us at the summit. So I'm really excited to start diving into those one-pagers. And I'm really excited to see them come in.
Certainly. The impact of these dollars is so exciting to see. And so we appreciate all of the time that you are sharing with us, Jackie, to communicate and help our grantees in supporting this advocacy work, as well as the time the grantees are putting in on their side as well. So I still don't see any questions, which tells me that we may be ready to move on, but please don't hesitate. If something peaks after this opportunity in this webinar, please reach out to teachervacancygrant@isb.net because we'd be happy to support.
Absolutely. So here's a few other communications tactics that can be useful with those secondary audiences we talked about at the start of the presentation. So the great thing about this one-pager is once you have it completed, you basically have everything you need to execute these other tactics. Because what you've got is a set of talking points. You've got the foundation for any other communications content that you might want to create. So after you have this one-pager created, you can shape this into a press release. You can host a press event and deliver remarks or give a tour to media. You can reach out to one reporter that you have a good relationship with and pitch just one story to them. You can say, hey, I've got a teacher here who went through our teacher residency program who would love to talk to you about their experience. Would you be interested in speaking with them? And reporters are always looking for sources and stories. So you can do a press release, a press event, or just reach out to one reporter and say, hey, would you be interested in talking to the director of the program and this teacher who went through the program about what these dollars have meant to them? And with local stakeholders, you can also use the content from your one-pager to create social media posts, items for your school or district newsletter. You can create a presentation to your board. And by doing all of this, you are equipping your stakeholders with the information that they need to join you in sharing the story of the impact and value of your teacher vacancy grant. And then that wraps up my presentation on telling your story. But before I let you go, I do want to plug a couple of toolkits we have online through our teacher recruitment marketing campaign. The answer is teaching. The campaign theme is premised on the idea that we all have questions in life, like how do I make a difference? How do I find fulfillment in work? How can I repay my student loans? What is a career that offers a competitive salary and great benefits? And our campaign says the answer to all of those questions is teaching. And we would love to invite you to join in this statewide effort to share about the benefits of becoming a teacher in Illinois. Our stakeholder toolkit here, linked at the bottom, is b.net/toolkit. That's our stakeholder toolkit, and it has graphics, videos, sample content for social media that you can easily download and post on your channels. So we encourage you to download these, share them with your communications folks, encourage them to post these graphics and sample posts on your social media channels, Instagram, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever you're on. We encourage you to share this content on your channels. And then we also have a teacher toolkit. And the teacher toolkit is for you to share with your teachers, those who have participated in teacher vacancy grant programming and those who have not, all your teachers, to encourage them to share in their own words, similar to the teacher testimonials you saw in the presentation today, about why they teach and what being a teacher means to them. And we'll be sending out some more emails and reminders about this teacher toolkit once we come back from winter break in January. So you'll see more from us on this. And that concludes my presentation today. So I thank you all. And again, if you have any questions, please send them to this email address and they'll get to Kirsten's team, who can get them to me if they're related to the one-pagers and to communications. Any support that we can provide in helping you to share the story of your grant dollars, we would love to help you with. And we look forward to seeing the drafts of your one-pagers.
Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to supporting you in the new year.